Good evening and welcome. My name is Alice Greenwald. I'm president and CEO of the 9/11 Memorial and Museum, and it is my distinct privilege to welcome all of you to this very special public program, the first to kick off an incredible slate of fall programs. I also want to extend a warm welcome to our museum members and to those tuning in to our live web broadcast. Tonight's program is particularly meaningful to me, as I will be retiring next week after 16 extraordinary years with the Memorial and Museum. And this marks my final public program as president and CEO. And what a fitting subject to focus on. A remarkable story of renewed operational capability by an agency devastated by unprecedented loss in its ranks and its leadership, and of true spiritual resilience, evidenced by uninterrupted service to community, a fierce sense of loyalty, and undeterred dedication to mission. On 9/11, the FDNY facilitated the safe evacuation of more than 15,000 people from the Twin Towers, the largest rescue operation in US history. More than 200 fire units responded, over half of all units in the city. In the aftermath of 9/11, the FDNY faced a terrible reality. 343 active duty members had been killed in the attacks, including much of the leadership. These losses included 22 chiefs, 20 captains, and 43 lieutenants. The department had to rebuild from top to bottom, all the while caring for grieving members and 9/11 families, deploying firefighters to Ground Zero for rescue and recovery operations, and providing fire protection for the city. In the 21 years since the attacks, and in the face of ongoing difficulties, including the increasing toll of 9/11-related illnesses among firefighters, the FDNY has remade itself and is now a model for fire departments around the world. Our guests this evening will reflect on this history with uniquely informed perspectives. 3 of them have been at the forefront of the department as former FDNY fire commissioners. And the 4th has masterfully chronicled the life and legacy of Chief William Feehan, one of the highest-ranking members of the FDNY, to be killed on 9/11. I will start with some introductions. Thomas von Essen served as the 30th Fire Commissioner of New York City from April 1996 to December 31st, 2001. In his final year as commissioner, he led the department through the September 11th attacks and also during rescue and recovery activities. Prior to serving as commissioner, he served as a New York City firefighter beginning in 1970, when he was assigned to Ladder 42 in the Bronx, where he spent most of his firefighting career. He also spent nearly 3 years as president of the Uniformed Firefighters Association, the largest firefighters union in the nation. Since returning to the private sector in 2002, he has been a fire and safety consultant for many respected organizations, including Honeywell and Underwriters Laboratories, and he served as the Region 2 administrator for FEMA. In 2002, Commissioner von Essen was made an honorary commander of the Order of the British Empire by Queen Elizabeth II. You are sitting with an OBE. Salvatore Cassano served as the 32nd Fire Commissioner of New York City from 2010 to 2014. He spent 44 years in the FDNY, where he held every uniformed rank prior to his appointment, including Chief of Operations, a position he assumed immediately after 9/11. In the wake of the attacks, he played a crucial role in rebuilding the department. And under his leadership, the FDNY continued to become better equipped, trained, and prepared. In 2009, Commissioner Cassano, not to be outdone by Commissioner von Essen, was awarded France's highest decoration, the Légion d'honneur, by French President Sarkozy. I love it. Daniel A. Nigro served as the 33rd Fire Commissioner of New York City from 2014 until his retirement earlier this year. Commissioner Nigro joined the FDNY in 1969, and over the years, he rose through the ranks of the department. He became a deputy chief in 1993, and in 1996, he oversaw the merging of the city's ambulance squads with the fire department. He was soon promoted in 1997 to chief of operations, overseeing all operations and training for more than 14,000 uniformed fire and EMS personnel. After 9/11, he was appointed chief of the department, following the death of his close friend, Chief Peter J. Gansey, Jr. As commissioner, Nigro continued a 16-year streak of fewer than 100 fire deaths in the city. He expanded fire safety education efforts, and he sought to diversify the department. Perhaps his biggest challenge was leading the fire department through the chaotic early days of the COVID-19 pandemic, the busiest stretch in the history of the city's EMS operation, exceeding even that of 9/11. Our three commissioners are joined tonight by author Brian McDonald. A New York City native, Brian contributes frequently to area newspapers, including the New York Times, and he has taught writing and journalism at several schools, including Fordham University. His first book, My Father's Gun, won critical acclaim and became the subject of a major History Channel documentary series. Brian is also the author of several nonfiction works, including his latest, 5 Floors Up, the heroic family story of 4 generations in the FDNY. 5 Floors Up is a social history of the FDNY, told from the perspective of the Feehan family, whose members served in the FDNY for 4 generations and counting. The book shines the spotlight on Chief William Feehan, the only person to have held every rank in the FDNY, including as New York City's 28th Fire Commissioner. He died on 9/11, responding to the World Trade Center. Today would have been Chief Feehan's 93rd birthday. And we are so honored tonight to be joined by members of the Feehan family. Welcome. We're so happy you're here. Before I turn the program over this evening to our Executive Vice President and Deputy Director for Museum Programs, Clifford Shannon, I hope you will indulge me and allow me to share just a few more thoughts by way of expressing my personal and professional thanks, especially to the commissioners. Over the years, the FDNY has been a true partner with the 9/11 Memorial and Museum. No matter what we asked, the answer was always yes. Well before we opened the museum, Tom agreed to be interviewed for our film, Facing Crisis, America Under Attack, which continues to be screened daily right here in this auditorium. And as a regular attendee at our Museum Planning Conversation series, Sal provided a critically important perspective that would actually help shape our approach to telling the fire department's 9/11 story. He was also among the first to participate in our youth and family programs, enthralling our youngest visitors by reading the book Fireboat, The Heroic Adventures of the John J. Harvey to them in our education center. Just imagine, you come to the 9/11 Museum and the fire commissioner is reading you a book. And Dan has been a trusted and supportive friend of this organization. From day one, it was, what can I do to help? I recall that relatively early in Dan's tenure as commissioner, around the FDNY's 150th anniversary in 2015, we began a program of welcoming FDNY probies to the memorial in conjunction with their graduation. That program has since grown to become part of our professional training programs, reaching approximately 600 new firefighters each year. I want to personally thank you for being such invaluable partners. And with that, please join me in welcoming all of our speakers in conversation with Cliff Shannon.
Thank you, Alice. It's taken us a moment to get to the program, but I do want to take a moment just to acknowledge Alice's service here, 16 years, which takes us from the very beginning of this all the way through to where you are today. You know, many people contributed, but Alice was the person who always kept her and our eyes on the prize, as she would remind me occasionally what the prize was. And so it's really just an extraordinary moment. We will find ways to honor her here as our programs continue, but just a moment of acknowledgement and thanks to Alice. I do want to also welcome our volunteers and our members. I see many of you here, many familiar faces in the audience as we begin our new season. There's also a number of folks here. Alice mentioned our professional programs who are here for those programs today and tomorrow, some of them in the audience today, just to know that those who protect us do come to the museum to reaffirm their mission. And also I want to add my thanks to the Feehan family. They say a pride of lions, let's say a pride of Feehans are here. It's an honor to have you here for this program. Gentlemen, as Alice said, and Dan Nigro, I do think your honor has been left out of the list. I see the little red tag on your lapel.
Well, yes, I think we all have that from the government of France.
Yes, yes.
So
we're sitting at the well, I didn't want to leave you out.
Well, thank you for noticing.
Yes, yes. We're sitting at the undecorated end of the panel here. I'll speak for myself, Brian.
No, I didn't get anything from France.
All right, here we go. Let's see if we can get anything out of that by the end of the program. You know, it is really important to us, as Alice mentioned, this relationship over years now with the fire department. I mean, how do you tell the story of 9/11 without the cooperation of these men and their colleagues, and just more than anything else, the trust that has grown over the years and the thanks that we have for them. I think it's also important to mention that the extraordinary service that our three commissioners provided, and we'll tell you about particularly in relation to 9/11 and what came after, should not obscure the fact that they are all survivors of the event. And so whatever their official function, whatever the responsibilities that they carried, the enormous responsibilities that grew as the buildings came down, they were also deeply, deeply affected, as you will hear, by what happened that day. And it's important to acknowledge that because the human dimension of this is something that everybody who went through that carries with them all the time. I did want to start for each of you, and we can start at the end. Well, maybe we'll start with Tom as the commissioner at that time. I just want to set the scene for our audience in terms of what your jobs and responsibilities were that morning that brought you there and what you were expected or planning to do in the midst of this terrible, terrible incident. So, Tom?
So the commissioner's job is not to put the fire out. That's there's the chiefs that we have here in the city are the best you're going to find anywhere. Mainly because we have such diverse set of buildings in the city. We have everything, you know, from the poorest to the richest to the worst made to the best built, and the chiefs get to see everything. So it's their job to put the fire out. The commissioner's job is to get there if you think it's appropriate, that it's something really big, and they might need some additional help from the politicians of the world, you know. And if there were less politicians in the world, we'd all be better off, but that's a different story for a different night. But the role of Giuliani's commissioners was to something really big. If the chiefs needed helicopter support, if they needed police support, they needed, you know, things that the normal operation might not require, you know, you got involved. And I enjoyed that much more than the rest of the job as commissioner, because I had been a firefighter. I was never a big chief like my partners here. So for me, just being in the middle of it was exciting, and I enjoyed that. And this operation, of course, we didn't realize it was as big as it became. First, we thought it was a small plane. The chiefs knew right away it wasn't, because they got guys up there in the elevator. And then they knew it's a commercial jet. That changed everything. They changed their whole thinking, their whole operation. And me, I was just constantly getting called by Giuliani. Where are you? Where are you? Where are you? So he's a pain in the neck with that stuff. You know, he wanted to hear from his person, not from, he didn't want to get it from 3 or 4 different people. So I was there quite a while, and when the second plane got hit, we all tried to get out of the lobby, and I worked my way and found Giuliani. So that was really my role. And then with the rest of the leadership of the city, we tried to get I mean, Kirk was on the phone with the White House. They're talking about jet planes, air support, and all this stuff. And then you realize, like, wow, holy mackerel, this is bigger than any fire chief in New York City has ever had to deal with. And we deal with the biggest stuff, but this was bigger than anything.
Yeah, Nigro?
Yeah, I was Chief of Operations, which is second in command to Chief of Department. So the chief and I responded together over the Brooklyn Bridge and looked up. And, you know, I said to Pete, this is going to be the worst day of our lives. You know, we can't put this fire out. And that was before the second plane struck, and the whole thing doubled. And we had a plan. The plan was to try to get people up there and get the people out who were above the area of impact. And we simply ran out of time. You know, Pete was in command. He never lost that until he was hit by the North Tower and killed. And my role, then Tom said when we found Pete and Bill together, that I was then the chief, and that went from there.
Sal?
I was an assistant chief of operations on September 11th, working with Dan and Pete, and they responded, and then I soon followed afterwards to respond. I ended up working with Chief Gansey, sort of as his assistant, and just culling information from the South Tower, from the Marriott, relaying it back. And, you know, one of the first things Pete asked me to do was just get the names of everybody that was off duty that had responded so that we had some handle on who was there besides our riding lists. And that in itself was difficult to sign because we had so many people off duty respond that wanted to go to work. It's not like anybody was shying away from this job. We knew it was the worst day we were going to ever face. We knew it was the biggest job we were ever going to face, and everybody wanted to be there. It was like all hands on deck. We need to be there to help out.
That took us a few days to gather those names.
Yeah. Brian, Bill Feehan, of course, was part of the response, this long, exceptional career in the department. And, you know, what any firefighter who could was going to go. It was clear from that. But what was he going to do in relation to Commissioner von Essen and the chiefs on that day?
Sure. Well, first of all, it's an honor to share a dais with three commissioners. I feel a little out of depth here, just a writer. The only award I got was from Troop 132 in Boy Scouts. So, but I really mean that. This is enough.
Now I'm the only one with absolutely nothing.
So, but it is an honor to be here. It really is, and especially in this setting, you know, it catches me. So I'm a writer. I didn't respond to 9/11, and I wrote about Chief Feehan, and he was first deputy commissioner that day, but he wanted to be known as Chief Feehan, called Chief Feehan. All of his top career, the last years of his career, no matter what rank he held, he was a humble guy, and he was in headquarters. And I know this from interviewing people that were in headquarters with him. I interviewed people who went into the North Tower with him. I interviewed people that were next to him when the South Tower came down, and when they. So let me just. That's how I know. I wasn't there. This is second. You're getting secondhand information here, but good, solid reporting. And Chief Feehan was in headquarters. He got in his car with his driver and Chief of Operations Tom Fitzpatrick, I believe at the time. And they raced over to Brooklyn Bridge, and by the time they got to, just before they got out, because of everything's going on, a couple of blocks from the Trade Center from the North Tower, and the plane hit the South Tower just at the same time they pulled in. So they all dove under their car, parts of the jet fuselage hit the street, body parts came down. It was a scene. It was a scene from hell. He made it to the North Tower. Commissioner von Essen spoke to him in the North Tower. And then he went looking for a secondary command post, and they ended up in the way it was set. It's still this way. The financial center is across the street over West Street. They went to West Street on the other side of Hudson River side of West Street to set up a secondary command post with Chief Gansey and I believe Chief Downey and maybe a couple other people. I mean, there were other people. I don't remember who it was. So that's where he was when the North Tower came down and killed him. From what I understood, he was he and Chief Gansey, and these gentlemen can correct me, were orchestrating a rescue operation for firefighters that were trapped in the Marriott Hotel at the time when the North Tower came down and killed him. And at the time, he was the oldest. He was 71. He would have been 72. Firefighter killed that day, and he was the highest ranking firefighter killed that day. And, you know, I write in the book that his face felt the heat of 1,000 fires. That might have been an exaggeration, maybe not, although he did work in some very busy houses. But at 71, he was still facing the fire. That's where he wanted to be, and that's how he died as a hero.
Let me ask, gentlemen, obviously, this is an extraordinary challenge to the command, to maintaining an order of operations, even as you said before, Sal, to knowing who's there and who's not. How did that sense of command evolve and then deteriorate over the course of time? What were you contemplating as you arrived? And then, of course, the second plane hits, and then, of course, the building comes down. I mean, the challenges of this and the concerns of all of your colleagues around there must just keep growing and growing and growing as this happens. Tom?
Well, like I said, for me, it was more of just trying to help. But we had some really top chiefs. I think they got there before you guys, right? Callan was there before you guys?
Callan got there with us, yeah.
Okay. Chief Pfeiffer was like the first battalion chief on the scene. And then the Donald Burns came. There were a lot of really good chiefs. We were criticized later on for not having a command post. And we had 4 command posts, and they all got knocked out. You know, it was the North Tower, the South Tower on the street, and at the Emergency Command Center. So no matter what we did, it just, you know, overwhelmed it. But the chiefs had good plans in place for that cascading kind of operation that just grew. But it was just too much. And like Danny alluded to, everybody would have gotten out if this whole thing didn't happen in 102 minutes. Right. You know, Chief Downey walked past me. I was standing at a command panel there in the lobby, and we felt vibrations, and it was the South Tower getting hit. We thought maybe it was an explosion in the elevator shafts. And Downey looked at me and he said, "Boss, you know, these buildings can come down." And that's when he went to the South Tower or to the Marriott Hotel, maybe.
To the hotel.
So, but when he left that lobby, and I knew, I mean, I looked at him, you know, he had those steel blue eyes, you know, he's really a solid guy, the most revered, highest ranking or most respected collapsed person in the country. FEMA used him, and I learned a lot about FEMA later on. But he just said, you know, they can come down. But I know in my heart, I mean, it'll take it to my grave. I know that he didn't mean in 102 minutes. He meant if we don't put these fires out, and we can't, because the lines had been severed. The first guys up there realized that. We can't put these fire out. This building's going to come down. Yeah. When? We don't know. Yeah. But even that, knowing that believing that we had a lot more time, the chiefs were still trying to get everybody out, as fast as they possibly could. And many of the guys were saying, "I can't come out. there's a mayday from somebody further up. We're helping a woman who's got a broken leg from a door is cracked." And, you know, it was one reason after another, you know. So,
I don't know.
I think all fire scenes appear to everyone as chaotic. It's organized chaos, but chaos. And at that scene, the main command post across on West Street where Pete was, and other chiefs, and the operations post, we split up. So we had chiefs, as Tom said, in the North Tower, the South Tower, the Marriott Hotel, and these were, you know, ranking, experienced chiefs, and they were running these individual operations by themselves as Pete orchestrated the larger operation around all the towers. So knowing how many people were there, how many units were there, we knew what units were called there. We didn't know that people rode. We knew they did. We didn't know how many rode who were off duty. Right. But again, we'll simply state that 102 minutes was the thing that changed the whole operation for us.
Yeah.
But you mentioned something, Cliff, when you said a deterioration of command.
Yeah.
There never was.
Yeah. Okay.
There was at the command post, I was at the command post with Chief Ganson. And he focused on South Tower, North Tower, the Marriott. We had chiefs in every building. He sent me there to coordinate some of the efforts and then get back to him. He had a handle on it. It was just think of 210-story buildings, 2 plane crashes in 17 minutes when it started.
Yeah.
It's just mind-boggling, the challenges that were faced. But Pete had things under control. Yeah. He knew exactly what we had to do. He knew exactly what we had to do. It was a matter of not running out of time.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I apologize for that.
no.
I meant kind of
I want
deteriorating
to just
conditions.
clarify that because there's never a deterioration of command.
Yeah.
He was in command, and there's no doubt about it. Yeah. And he was just,
And angry. Pete would get angry at when the fire seemed to be winning. He would get somewhat angry that we can do this.
But when that South Tower collapsed, and we scurried into the World Financial Center, and that's why we set up that command post there so that if something happened, we had some cover. But when we came back up, right away, Sal, get the command post, move it north. I'm going down south. Get me a number of companies. We got to get this rescue effort underway. That's when Bill went down there with him. He met Ray down there with him. And that's where they were going.
Yeah.
And so I gave those orders and started to make my way down south with him. And the North Tower collapsed.
We initially set up in the middle of West Street.
Oh, no.
Only for a few minutes
No,
because
absolutely.
besides
No, then we looked
pieces
up-
of the building coming out, people were coming out of the building, and we moved further west.
Let me ask something that Commissioner Nigro said earlier. You saw, and other firefighters who were there who survived the day have said this. I mean, it was too much fire, essentially, that it turned out there was a time limit also. But, what is it like to be in a command position in this extraordinary disaster and to have the sense that not only can you not get everybody out, but you're sending firefighters into these circumstances which are deeply, deeply dangerous?
I think it's a realization that we have to shift priorities. So we can't put the fire out, but possibly we can get a stairway cleared between the safe area and the area above impact and get people down. And we heard it from the South Tower, the transmissions. People reached the area of impact. Firefighters reached it, and we're just in the process of getting above through a stairway, trying to clear that stair. And that became the plan. Putting out the fire was not going to happen, but perhaps we could rescue people that were trapped.
Yeah. So Chief Palmer got up there with some others. Yeah,
They did.
Ronnie Bucca was up there with him.
that's right. That's right.
Line of 15.
Yeah. I want to, there's an incident that you describe in the book, an interaction with Commissioner von Essen and the first deputy commissioner in the lobby of the North Tower, I think it is.
I'll let him tell that story.
You mentioned something before about Bill Feehan. And I haven't been able to read the book, so I don't know if you have it in the book. But you talk about the fact that he's 71. I don't know if you know that you cannot be a fire officer or a firefighter after 65. So he was not supposed to be a chief on the street. And but that didn't matter to him. In other words, everybody knew that there was nobody with any more experience or a greater sense of a major tragedy like that that they had in front of them than him. And he just felt like this is where he was supposed to be. Mm-hmm. I tried to get him to go to I didn't know at the time that the emergency command center was shut down. That was already evacuated. I wanted him to go there and coordinate, the activity for because I knew I had to run around chasing the mayor. But he wanted no part of it, He just looked at me like, what planet are you from? I'm going out there with the street. And I totally understood that because I always had that same different feeling at a much lower level. I'd never compare my firefighting expertise to his. But I had that same gut reaction from the craziness that most of the guys have, that they want to be in the middle of this ridiculous place that you shouldn't be anywhere near, Yeah. But that's how if you come from a good company, not everybody has that luxury of coming from a good company and learning from guys that are really good. But I had that, and I always had that that sense of that's where you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
And that was his. That was just his attitude on steroids.
Yeah.
You know, he just no matter how much of the normal BS we had to do as commissioners, because he was the. When they gave me the job, they said to me, "There's only one condition." I said, "What's that?" "You have to keep Feehan." I said, "I have to keep Feehan." I said, "Oh, thank you. Thank you for telling me I have to keep Feehan." I wouldn't have been anybody that would want to keep more than him, you know. I didn't have an entourage of only political people, you know. I liked having real people.
Yeah.
And you couldn't get any more real than Bill.
Yeah, what Brian, you've studied, you've spoken with the family and his
Yes.
colleagues and all of that. You know, how can you summarize that quality of the man?
Well, I think, first of all, that quality runs right through the family for 4 generations. It happened. His father was a firefighter in the late 20s to the late 50s. He was a very active firefighter. That I found out he was hospitalized at least 3 times, much to the consternation of his wife. His wife kept trying to get him because they had the wife's brother was a priest, and back then priests were like union bosses. They could make all sorts of deals in the fire department, and she kept lobbying her brother to get him, transferred to some place. So finally, to placate her, said, "All right, I'll go to Queens." But they had just instituted something called the rescue truck. So he got himself transferred to Rescue 4, which was the busiest time of his career. So he did it. But yeah, and then it went through Chief Feehan for his career. He ran into a lot of fires early in his career. He was a different firefighter than his dad. He wanted to go up the ladder, and he wanted to know every. I think it was Ray Goldback who worked with him at headquarters. And Goldback told him after the towers came down, Goldback said, "This is when we need Chief Feehan the most, right now." And the reason is because not only the breadth of his firefighter knowledge, but because he was so studious in everything. Every rank that he held, he knew it up and down. And he knew that because he had gone to Cathedral High School. He was going to be a priest. Until he found out the girls in Bishop McLaughlin High School were more interesting than Gregorian chants. He went to St. John's University in the early 50s. No guys from Queens, from a firefighter family, went to St. John's at that time. He got a 4-year degree, and he brought that studious attitude to every rank he had. So he knew. I mean, there's plenty of people and on this dais who love the fire department and know the fire field as well as, but none of them loved it any more than him.
Yeah. Let me ask about that in particular, because the way Brian describes it, Bill Feehan seems a link to a much earlier time in the department, yet someone who came through to the modernization and the recreation even before 9/11 of what the FDNY would become. Am I right about, what that was, that link to the past that became so important in his reputation and his ability to speak to colleagues and be this source of information?
Well, I'll tell you, the first time I met Bill, I was a young firefighter in Manhattan, 55 engine. I was on house watch and reading, got to read, and he was working overtime in the company. He stood by me for an hour, told me how important it was to study, how important it was to know the job, how important it was to know your buildings. It was the first time I met him. And from that time on, I just revered him, and he sort of spurred me on to study. And then I was always 1 or 2 ranks behind him. But it was enough to say, well, Bill, I can get up there as well. Yeah. But I was a young pro when he sat down and spent an hour with me to talk to me about the importance of studying and knowing your job and knowing your neighborhood and knowing your buildings. And that's what Bill was all about.
Yeah. Dan?
Yeah, well, I mean, he was the best speaker we ever had in the department. That history, he'd, at a moment's notice, you could say, "We need somebody to speak," and he'd quote William Butler Yeats or somebody, and the firefighters in the audience would be looking and saying, I don't know what he's talking about, but he had this expansive knowledge of other subjects besides the fire department, which he knew everything about, which made him all the more interesting. And having his father have served from the 1920s, I thought my father, who started in the 1940s, went back far enough, but Bill's father goes back to another era, just after the horses had left the department, but he worked with plenty of firefighters who actually worked in that era. So his history was fantastic, and he would spend time with us and talk about it and talk about things and teach you. And everybody you speak to say he was a mentor. He was a mentor. So that's pretty good, you know, that so many people respect him as a mentor.
You know, all the reading that you do, and so much that an outsider learns about the fire department is what goes on in the firehouse when you get assigned. And that's really where you're taken under the wing in a good house of the senior guys, and that's how you learn your way up. And I mention this because 9/11 is the moment where so much of that experience ends. And so you three in particular are central to trying to figure out what comes next. We didn't know that there would not be more terrorist attacks. There were certainly going to be other emergencies and need for the experience and expertise that had been lost. The city needed to be protected. There was the plane crash out in the Rockaways shortly thereafter. I mean, it really was an awful chapter, but an awful series of chapters in the history of the department. And so, you know, I'm very interested in each of your impressions of when did it sink in that the next chapter had to begin in these terrible circumstances and in the shadow of really unimaginable loss. Tom, you were the commissioner at that point.
Well, I mean, when you say sink in, I think back to not even having a clue about bin Laden and all that stuff. I don't know. I just didn't think. Somebody said something about those characters a month later to me, and I was like, what? I didn't even focus on it. It was just, we had so much going on, and the biggest part for us, even though the operations were, a big deal, the families, we had a history and a tradition of really doing everything we could for the families, and we had improved that. When Commissioner Safer came, we started to really get our act together, I think, with that stuff. I was in the union at the time, and I saw a big difference. And it just got better with me, and it got better with Sal and Danny. We really, you can't please everybody, but we certainly did everything we possibly could for the families. But the experience itself, at going through it, it was just, you couldn't even understand it, because what we had done normally for one family, or if you had a tragedy like Father's Day, you had three families, which you were like overwhelmed at the possibility of something like that. And we all thought, oh my God, well, this is the worst thing that could possibly happen to us. We have 6 months to go on a term with Giuliani and stuff. And then to get hit with this, and we tried to figure it out, thinking that we could do the same with 1 or 3 and do the same with over 300. And it was just kind of comprehensive. I remember meeting with the cardinal, not him, but his staff, and they said that, listen, we'll go through this funeral stuff with you, but we're not going to have in other words, we were going to have, what do we call a ceremony when you just had a ceremony at the church, not a body?
A memorial.
A memorial.
Yeah.
We'll do the memorial, but then if you find remains, we're not going to do a funeral. Because now we got 343. Well, let's turn it into 686, or whatever the math is. So
Oh, we did.
the church.
We did.
The church was, we're not going to do that. We have our limits. And as soon as the first one happened, the church rolled. The Catholic Church rolled over and gave us a funeral after we had already had a memorial, and we were like, holy mackerel, we can't do this, but we did it.
Yeah.
And that was the worst part of it, in my opinion. The operational stuff, replacing a fire truck, getting equipment and stuff like that. Yeah, it was hard, but there was nothing compared to dealing with the families. And some were just, it was rough.
Yeah. Dan, you moved into the role that your good friend had played to
Yeah,
the
I
collapse.
say that's not the way anybody should take over that job. It's a great job, Chief of Department, but certainly not that way. And I think, as Tom said, we had so many things to do, and it was a juggling act, not for entertainment, but a The families came first, the operations at the World Trade Center. We still kept the rest of the city safe. For the first 2 months, all of us expected more attacks. The members out in the field were on edge the whole time that this was going to happen again. What are we going to do if this happens again? And I think all of us felt the same. We did what we had to do, and each night when we got home, we wondered if we would get in and make it the next day, get to the next funeral, and keep going. But we did. I told somebody right in the beginning, there's no way the band will play at all of these funerals. They proved me wrong. They played at every funeral. Somebody for part of the band was at every funeral. I still don't know how they did it. The members stepped up, people stepped up into other chiefs' positions, and the job continued to do what it does best, protect the people of the city.
I just remember the next morning we had a meeting, and somebody asked, well, when did you start to rebuild? The next morning. We had a meeting, you brought us all together. We had Tommy McDonald right away gave orders, we got to get rigs, we got to get equipment, we got to get masks. And we started to do it the next morning and get our vendors on board. They diverted apparatus that were going to other cities, sent them to us, same thing with masks. And I said, the hardest thing was the memorials and the funerals and taking care of our families. The operational stuff we had a lot of help with, but the emotional stuff was different.
We met with federal people that night, probably about 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning at Gracie Mansion. And they were collapse experts that told us, you're not going to find anybody alive. And I remember looking at Giuliani and saying, holy shit, we're going to tell everybody that tomorrow, and we're not going to find anybody alive. And we're not going to hold out hope that maybe there's, like you see on TV, there's a steel beam and somebody's under it and the water's dripping and they have a little air. And, like you see in all these horrible tragedies that go on around the world. He said, no, the steel and the concrete, the compression, the heat, you're not going to find anybody alive. And he was absolutely right. But we decided that night, we're not going to take that position. We're going to keep trying to find people, and we're going to hold out hope that there are people alive. And I think we did it too long. If I would Monday morning quarterback ourselves, I think we did it too long, because you almost make it worse by holding out hope for people when there really was no hope. But we just, that's what we thought we were doing the right thing, but I think it was a mistake when I look back at it.
I again, very struck by the culture of the fire service and, the sense of stepping up and doing what needs to be done. But, frame it for me in the context of that impetus and the loss that every one of you suffered in terms of personal loss of friends that you've had, in some cases family members. I mean, what is it about, and I'm going to ask this question to you about the family tradition of the Feehans. I mean, what is it that drives the people who can do these extraordinary things under impossible circumstances?
Well, we are the New York City Fire Department. We suffered tremendous losses, but we've always had a really good bullpen, good succession plan. You always study for a rank above what you really were. And, Tom named me the chief of operations when Dan was chief of department. And that was my job. I was going to do it to the best of my ability for as long as it took me to get it done. And everybody else was the same way. Dan was chief of department, people we made staff chiefs. It was a tremendous promotion on, I think it was September 16th. Hundreds and hundreds of promotions, lieutenants, captains, chiefs. And everybody knew they had a responsibility that this department was hurting, and everybody that we were promoting was going to be part of this rebuilding effort. And they knew what they were going to get done.
Yeah, the job continues to evolve. It always has. And this was just a quantum leap of evolution where suddenly, instead of things happening in slow succession as we always expected, it happened overnight. And people were forced to just, as they say, step up. So we lost Ray Downey, who's irreplaceable. Everybody's irreplaceable. He was. But John Norman stepped up into his position, and was a highly trained individual and did a wonderful job as chief. And I think everybody that was asked to do something at the next level did the very best they could.
Sort of like battlefield commissioners.
Yeah, yeah. This is something that's such an important theme in your book because you mentioned it before, 4 generations of Feehan family, and there are so many family traditions in the department. Father and son Angelini firefighters killed on 9/11. I mean, this is endless, in fact. But, what is that family impetus? Because it speaks, I think, more broadly to the question of the brotherhood that develops across the ranks within the department. Right.
Yeah. First I would be remiss if I didn't mention, and this goes to the theme of tonight. The book goes from Chief Feehan's father to Chief Feehan, and then it takes a little turn. Tara Feehan married Brian Davin. They're here tonight with us. And John Feehan was the 3rd generation in the Feehan family, but I went to the Davin family. I took a right-hand turn. And Brian was Brian was a firefighter at 9/11, responded just afterwards, right?
After the towers came down.
And you were promoted to lieutenant how soon after?
Well, that battlefield promotion on the 16th, that left me 2 away from lieutenant.
Sorry.
Which I was very happy for, because we were still in shock.
Yeah.
So I was promoted at the next promotion, January of 2002.
So you can imagine how crazy we were, because we didn't know that.
Absolutely.
We never would have done it. We would have made 4 more, If you were 5 away, we would have gone over quota, we didn't know that. I swear to God.
You kept it a good secret.
First time I heard that.
Especially if Feehan was around. Talk about a deal maker,
So and that thread, goes to Connor. Connor Davin is a firefighter in Engine 231 in Brownsville, and that's one of the busiest firehouses in the city. So they're still running into burning buildings, Yeah. And I start the book in, right after the attack when the family got together. And, it's an very emotional scene. It's Bill Feehan was there, Chief Feehan's son, who's not a firefighter, John, Brian, the wives, that family, when this happened, that family coalesced. Not that they weren't close anyhow, but they came together like it was going to be us against everybody. We're going to get through this together. And I think that's it's not part of the book is one of the things I'm happy about is that I could talk about the women and the spouses. Today it's not only women, it's men who are the spouses of firefighters and what they go through and how much they suffer and how much they sacrifice for this, And that was the supreme sacrifice that day. And you could see it in the Feehan and the Davin family.
Yeah. Let me take you to the present day, and you've each contributed to where the FDNY is today. But I'd like the 3 of you to look back. It's 21 years plus, and time passes, and it's a new generation of firefighters, by and large. Where do you see the department today? Where do you see the traces of 9/11 in the department to this day? And what drives the next iteration of the Fire Department of New York, in your view?
Well, I think a good thing to mention right now is after 9/11, right after 9/11, a long operation for the fire department was always 24 to 72 hours. Now we were faced with being at the site for months on end. So they brought in the Forestry Service Incident Command Team. We had no idea what that was. How can people that fight forest fires help us? But they trained us in Incident Command. And now in Florida, our Incident Command team's already on the ground down in Florida. And they're doing what they do best, is managing very large, very complex operations. And that's all as a result of the evolution of the department after 9/11. We really looked at ourselves hard. We brought in McKinsey and Company, and we said to ourselves, what can we do better? What can we do more of? And I think as long as the department continues to do that and look ahead and say, what do we need to do 10 years from now? What do we need to do 20 years from now? We'll be fine, because if we stay in the past, nobody will look up to us any longer as they do today.
Sal?
I agree with Dan. Many of the lessons that we learned from September 11th, we've passed that on to the fire service, not only in the country, but throughout the world. They come to us to look at what can we learn from your experience. And our chiefs go all over the country, all over the world, and share the lessons learned, share best practices. And that says a lot about the department. I mean, 21 years later, we are so much more prepared and equipped and trained than we ever were. Again, through the adversity of September 11th, and we want to make sure that if that attack happens again, we'll handle it with the same courage and dedication and heroic efforts that we did, but with better technology. That's here now presently. Whoever talked about drones, we never thought we'd talk about drones. We got drones now, we got different views. So we've come a long, long way, but we want to make sure that we pass that on to the fire service to get them better prepared as well.
Yeah. Tom, your thoughts?
I think they pretty much said it. I spoke a lot around the world for Honeywell and Underwriters Laboratories for years after the tragedy. And then people ask you, think anything good came out of September 11th? And I said, well, all I could think of is that what our guys did that day raised the level of respect, admiration, reverence for firefighters throughout the world, not just for us. Not everybody, they weren't saying like, oh, those are the only good firefighters. What they were saying is like, wow, that's what a first responder does. They put it all out there for a stranger. And I thought that was, I was really proud to be, representing those people for that day and what they stood for.
We see that here in the museum every day, that attitude towards fire service. Let's see if we have a question or two from the audience. Raise your hand. We have mics that will come and find you.
Give me a headache.
There we go.
Go ahead.
My name is Ed Welter. Wow, very loud.
Yeah, that's,
Little hot, fellas.
I've been a docent here and volunteer for 11 years, and I know Sal pretty well. So first, I just want to tell you guys something about Sal. He has taken us under his wing and has brought us to different firehouses. He's got us in Randall's Island. So we got to see things we would have never seen or learned if it wasn't for Sal. But I did have a real question. My background for 30 some odd years is building construction and management. When you're going to a fire and you're in the truck, do you know, and you put the address in that you're going, do you have any idea what type of building you're heading to? Wood frame, poured concrete, steel, building built in 1850 or a building built in 1950? Do you know that ahead of time?
We have a program which we call CIDS, Critical Information Dispatch System, where each company, if they have, you can't do it for every building in the city, but if it's a particularly difficult building, you will enter that information into the system so that when you're responding, it comes up on your mobile data terminal, and it'll give you the history of that building, when it was built. But again, it's not for every building. We have 900,000 buildings in the city. So if it's a difficult building, yes. I mean, if you're a tenant, you live in Staten Island, you're responding to a private dwelling. No, it's a private dwelling. You might have a laminated I-beam in there. We'll put that into the program as well. So if it's a difficult building, we'll add it onto our CIDS program.
And also, we have something called Incident Command, and it was developed, the program was developed by our Manhattan Borough Commander, the current commander. You can bring up on your iPad all about the buildings, and what it does is it uses information that's out there. We didn't have to create all the information, like you can go on Google Maps, right? You can see the building. So that's what we can do on Incident Command. It actually takes you to that building before you get there. And then from home, our chiefs can see before they respond, they can look and see who's there, where are they, and it's a tremendous asset. And this will only get better as time goes on, just as other tools that we use on our phones. I mean, our phones are now more powerful than the most powerful computers 10 years ago. So we can only imagine what will be available to the members in just a few years.
Thank you. In the back, Lauren. Wait for the mic.
Thank you. I just had a question for Brian in terms of what drew you to this project or how you were introduced to the Feehan family and kind of led you on this journey.
Yeah, I'm excuse me, I lucked out. It kind of fell in my lap. Beth Feehan was doing a documentary on her father-in-law, Bill Feehan, Chief, and she was looking for representation. She talked to a literary agent. We have a mutual friend, and the mutual friend introduced us, and I have some experience. I tend not to talk about this a lot around the firefighters, but I come from a cop family, and I wrote about that. A family memoir, My Father's Gun, was my first book. So she knew that I had some experience writing civil service family story, and I kind of brought that to bear. I mean, there is differences, but at its root, it's pretty similar. So.
But you did have a connection to the fire service. You were a bartender.
Oh, yeah, that too. That too, yes.
Okay, moving along. Another question. Down there in the front.
Oh, no.
Oh, no, it's just
I hope
waving
that
at you.
doesn't get the mic.
Don't worry, I'm not going to stop you. It's not really a question, but I just wanted to just say that hearing you talk about the prioritization that you had families, site and city, I can say as a member of one of the families that you absolutely did exactly what you said here, and just want to express our gratitude because we felt it all the way through. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Someone else? Please. No? Have we passed the mic already? We'll get you. Hang on. We're going to have a conflict. Well, we'll go here first and then to you. Go ahead.
You mentioned incident command was one of the focuses after 9/11. Were there any other tactics, procedures, or processes that you changed as a result of the response to 9/11?
I think obviously, like Sal mentioned it before, the command post we have at headquarters, everybody went to World Trade Center. I mean, we all wanted to be there. Everyone rushed out of headquarters and went to the World Trade Center. And then later on, we realized this is not a good idea. Some of the senior leaders has to stay behind. And we had enhanced what we have at headquarters, the ability to see things from there in Brooklyn. And some people would stay back today rather than respond in together because losing so many valuable people at once was a pretty sad lesson for the department.
Please.
First, I want to say thank you all for being here. It's been very informative. I went to another program a couple of weeks ago with Jessica Dulong. You guys, I'm sure some of you probably know the name. She was a FDNY fireboat captain, was in the Hudson River on 9/11, pumping water to the guys in the buildings. And the subject of the program was history and heroism, and she said something that I thought was interesting, and I don't want to misrepresent her, but it sounded to me like it's an FDNY vet that she didn't consider herself and her actions on that day to be heroic because it's what you sign up for when you take when you sign up for the FDNY. And she gave other examples, like of a woman who was on one of the higher floors who refused to leave the floor until everybody else on that floor had left, and she perished in the fire, and she considered that woman's actions to be heroic. I'm wondering how you feel about the heroism debate, whether you think FDNY people are heroic for what they did on that day, and if not, if you have examples of heroism that you saw while you were there that day.
Well, people sometimes will say to me that I'm a hero. I says, we lost all our heroes that day. I survived. But I will tell you that the people that we sent into those buildings, even the ones that got out, they never questioned their duty. They never questioned the orders. They knew they had a job to do. So yeah, there was ordinary people doing heroic acts. And we all saw it firsthand that people went into those buildings. A lot of them knew they might not come back home, but they went and did their job. We had thousands of people to evacuate, to rescue. And there was a lot of heroic acts done that day.
2002 was the only year the fire department did not hold Medal Day. And it wasn't because we didn't have heroes, it was because we had too many heroes.
Yeah, I would agree.
I think the designation of hero comes more from the outside than from the inside, and I don't think you get much debate here about who actually are heroes in this context. So thank you for that. Well, this has been remarkable. I'd like to thank the 4 panelists, Tom von Essen, Sal Cassano, Dan Nigro, and Brian McDonald. Brian will be outside signing his book. I also want to make a little pitch for those of you who, it's not quite a decoration at the level that our panelists have, but if you'd like to become members of the museum, you can go outside and take a membership and walk away with that as your decoration for the evening and for having come. With that, and to the Feehan family, thank you. I really want to thank everyone for being here and wish you a very good night. Thank you.